Is ethical AI in game dev possible, especially when LLMs have already eaten the entire internet? If you're a leader trying to figure out how AI can impact game dev, this episode is for you. How can you use AI to build better games and support your team without exposing your studio's IP, ticking off your team and players, and crossing ethical lines you won't be able to uncross later? Today, I'm talking with Ben Chevalier. He's the Chief AI Officer at Mighty Bear Games. His job is literally to figure out how Mighty Bear can use AI to ship faster, make better decisions, and create games that are both enjoyable and discoverable. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the real value of AI in game dev, the ethical and legal choices you and everyone need to make, and some unexpected use cases that can help your team move much faster. We start with the ethics and morality of AI, like should LLMs even have all the data in the first place, and then we dig into how Mighty Bear trains on their own content. And finally, we break down practical ways you can use AI to support your designers, artists, and engineers so you can actually lead this shift with confidence. You are the Chief AI Officer, so you've been thinking about AI and its use in video games. This
Mhm.
is to say it's a hot button topic is almost the understatement of the century about like how AI is impacting everything. We're seeing layoffs. Some people hold AI as partially or
Mhm.
completely responsible for that, as well as whatever else might be going on in the market. Um, I want to start with the question around morality of AI because I think this has been a debate in game development, especially. We're creative industry. There's a lot
Mhm.
of art expressed by a lot of different people, and there's a lot of concerns around AI from the moral lens. So,
Mhm.
how are you thinking about that? How are you addressing that concern?
I don't I don't have probably like a very satisfactory answer that would be, something that everyone can align on and be like, yes, this is great. I have a probably a more business oriented answer, but a business oriented answer that is more thinking about survival of the business and um the jobs that we have in our company, more than anything else, to be very fair. So what I mean by that is that um I want us to be, as a company at least, I want us to be focused on what we do with this technology rather than what it is trained on. And my perspective is that it should ideally be trained on everything to understand everything so that we can do what we want to do with it. Not necessarily reproduce existing content, which is not ours, but build our content, build our IPs, create the art styles that we want to create. Can do that, traditionally. We can do that with AI if we want, but be in control of what we're producing, and then um, scaling that content using models that understand what we're doing, and without being trained on a vast variety of styles and content, it will not be capable of understanding what we do. So our approach is to always fine tune. Where I'm getting at is whatever we do with AI, it's never taking the model or the LLM or whatever it is and just using it like vanilla out of the. We always train on our data. We always train on our content. So we're not technically we're not using the style of another project, for example, or we're not reusing the characters of another project, which would be crazy. But I think that lies into really like what are the values, what are the principles that run a company. There are no technically like right now there are no guardrails. Not using AI is essentially saying we're not going to be able to compete. We're not going to be able to be as efficient as we can be right now. I'm a production artist, which means that I have to use the tools that are at my disposal to serve a vision or serve a product or serve an audience. And AI is one of them. So again, it's like, how do we use it? Like, what do we use it for?
I want to dig into this a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of looking at this, and I see three different things emerging. I don't know if they're layers or what. One
Mm-hmm.
is, again, up from that moral or ethical framework. Hey, look, I
Mm-hmm.
want to keep people employed in this industry. And I want them to be effective in the industry. And
Mm-hmm.
there's there's an argument that you're making, which is in the absence of the best tools available, it's much harder to stay employed. And AI is a good tool that is helpful. And so if you refuse to use it, then you hinder your chances of remaining employed. And that also hinders the chances of the business
Mm-hmm.
being successful.
Yeah.
Because if you're not able to work as effectively as others to get to where you're trying to go, then that's like a lose for everybody. We don't produce things for players as well as other companies. And so there's an existential, like you said, sort of the business question of, if I'm not using AI, am I basically giving myself a handicap against those that will? And does that mean that I will not be able to eventually employ my people and create things that I think players want to play? So that's one layer.
Yeah.
There's a second layer, which is, okay, so how do we train these AI models? Which I think a lot of, not all, but a lot of the morality questions around AI often come from this one. And you're saying, well, I want it trained on everything that's out there. So I assume when you say everything there, you just mean like, look, the internet, right? The LLM, the LLMs that are out there are broadly trained on just like whatever is out in the public sphere via the internet. I want them to be able to see all those things. And that allows them to do what they need to do. If they're not trained in all that, it's actually very difficult to get them to do what you want them to do when it comes to something like art. But then you add a layer in here where you say the problem is not that it's trained on everything at the LLM level. The problem would be if we started copying other styles directly, basically taking advantage of in some ways, artistic IP, right? I think there have been a few controversies with this, and Disney's suing, and some other people are suing, and they're going like, "Hey, you've basically directly imitated our style."
Correct.
So for you, you actually differentiate on the moral level between, is the LLM trained on all of the stuff, from how are we using the stuff that it's based on whatever it's been trained on.
Yeah. And I think this is the only way I can really look at it right now. Again, because I don't think maybe I wasn't clear enough on that side. My belief is that these tools are not going away. The models are not going to be trained on anything else but everything. I don't think this is going to change. And this is not going to change because of macroeconomic competitiveness, reasons. We can't allow, I suppose, in the US, for example, to not be competitive against other major, builders of these models, like China, for example. Countries are being saying like we should build, sovereign models and everything. Yes, of course we can, but we're not going to be, again, as competitive and as fast as if, private companies are doing this. And in particular, if they're built to, as I said, like understand as much as possible of the world, which means, pretty much everything, right? And I don't believe that there will be at any point of time a real, I'll say that, any particular steps that are going to be taken by governments or, like generally governments just say like, stop, like we need to protect IPs, we need to protect our companies, or like we're going to protect IPs or using IPs or copyrighted content to train these models from American or European models, because the Chinese models are not going to stop, right? Like no one else is going to stop that. So, if that puts us at a disadvantage in terms of the content that we can build on the back of that, or how smart these machines can be, I don't think this is going to stop. So, from the perspective of you're not putting the genie back in the bottle, essentially, this is not going to, like, I don't think there will be any kind of regulation around that. From that perspective, then the question is, what do we do about it? And the question becomes like, how do we use that? So as you were saying, like you said, if if I'm not using it, other companies will. If I'm not, being competitive enough, I'll be probably, eaten up. And I don't really, you're just left with your own principles on how you want to approach that. And I don't think it changes. So it just makes it easier for sure. But I don't think it changes the fact that if as a person or if as a company, I want to use copyrighted content, AI or not AI, I just would do it. Right. And that's it. AI makes it much, much easier. But I don't really, I'll say that. I don't really buy into the idea that when we use AI, we don't know what we're doing anymore. And sort of like by mistake, we would be using other people's IPs. Like for most, game companies or entertainment companies making content, people who generate this content most of the time kind of know what they're doing. They're still like, it's for most, it's still artists making the content. I'm not suggesting. I think there is this idea often kind of mixed up where it's like, then anyone can produce anything. That's probably not what's going to happen, right? Even right now, game companies using AI, artists are probably going to be the ones, generating content and then doing whatever they need to do in Photoshop, Max, or 3ds Max, whatever it is. So it's not like people don't know what they're doing. Like I have this conversation sometimes, like I'm probably, so either I'm, how say that? I'm morally bankrupt. Like I know what I'm doing and I'm stealing content and I'm happy to do that. Well, no, that's not exactly well. Like I'm used to work with IPs. I've been working with major IP holders, so I understand how that works. And I'm not doing this, this kind of like reproducing their content and using it. Or I'm kind of like too stupid to realize that I'm actually using copyrighted content. Like I'm just generating stuff randomly, and then that's what we do as a company, and we have no idea. So it's like, usually it's like one of these buckets when I'm having these conversations. I'm like, no, you can absolutely be very aware of, the characteristics of your own work versus other works in terms of style and like generally what makes a brand or an IP, and make sure that whatever you're producing is, your content and not someone else's content. So I don't really buy too much into the idea that, by mistake we would be using other people's, we design everything. We still design everything down to the details.
I want to continue to kind of devil's advocate a little bit for it.
No, it's super interesting.
Into this. Yeah, because again, you have an art direction background, like you've worked with IPs. There are people being sued over this, and I think that does relate more to the direct copy of things as opposed to
exactly.
Oh my goodness, who is the Japanese artist that everybody was sort of imitating? Studio Ghibli?
Ghibli, yeah.
Ghibli, yeah. Studio Ghibli. So Studio Ghibli, and then everybody started just producing all this AI stuff, and there was a lot of people, including Studio Ghibli, who were like, "This is kind of offensive, right? Like you're just auto generating this stuff." And so I think what I hear you saying is like, look, yes, that is incorrect, right? That is not a good use. You're definitely imitating somebody else's style. However, when it comes to this idea of, and I've heard different takes on this. We have these LLMs; they are trained on everything. Attribution is very difficult because of the nature of how LLMs work. I've heard people are trying to design models where you can actually attribute back to original people, but the problem becomes that if you use that and it's like, well, okay, I used a horse, and it's like, yeah, okay, well, I used like 10,000 pictures of a horse, so does everybody get a quarter of a cent who created, like, what do we do with attribution once it's in place, even unless if we use a smaller model, because I think only inside of a smaller model would attribution actually lead to anything positive for the artists involved. So there's some issues there, but people are trying to like solve that. They're trying to figure out how to make an attributable LLM. It's just not the way that LLMs are designed based on how they sort of translate data, from what I understand. And so you have this problem of, okay, now we're training on everything, and people are going, look, that's my living. My living has now been sucked into the cloud. And when you type in, I want a horse riding across a field or something like that, my work is part of what you did. And like part of me is very sympathetic to that, because I get it. I get like, yes, that is work. But again, I'm trying to sort of understand your perspective. It's like, look, yes, 10 years ago, I totally get it. Now we have fundamentally changed. Like there is a shift in technology that has meant that because everything has been sucked into these things at this point, like you said, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We have to move forward. And it is dangerous for governments to not move forward from the perspective of, you could go to all kinds of things, but just basically the employability of the people within their space. If you ban people from using this, will they simply be less effective, slower, these sorts of things? And again, I come back to this idea, like, and so maybe I don't know if I'm devil's advocating, more trying to explain like the different angles on this. You're basically saying there's nothing we can do about this now. Let's move on. Let's move forward. Let's use these things, but we can't assume our moral assumptions from 10 years ago apply today, now that the world has changed. We have to think about these things in a different way, because the alternative is actually worse for everybody, not better.
I think that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. To put it. I would. So look, if I was to police something, I would not police what we put into the model to make the model smarter and more capable. I would police the output. I would police what people do with it. I would police the content that is being built and the intent that is applied to the production of this content. So yeah, I would agree. Yes, like, the Ghibli style kind of overused by millions of people to to produce content like that. Yes, that's a problem for Ghibli. I agree, and I don't think it should be that simple, to produce this content, because it's a direct copy of the Ghibli style, which is theirs, and it's been developed over 50 years or so. I mean, Studio Ghibli has been, and particularly Miyazaki, has been around for a very long time. I think this is probably not okay. That's not a great use of AI. Then again, sometimes we make a fairly big, we make it bigger than what it really is, because the Ghibli thing just vanished. Do we see a lot of people making Ghibli content anymore? Not that much. It's exploded and it's gone. When someone is so easy, when something is so easy and everyone can do it, like, the value is not that high anymore. So it's not like what matters at the end is Ghibli. It's not a Ghiblified picture of my kids, right? And it's not like we're stealing, as a user, I'm really stealing Ghibli's work per se. I'm not making any money out of this. Like, that's UGC, people making content for their friends and families and everything. I'm not saying it's okay, right? But I'm saying it's not as big as a problem as, stealing an IP or stealing an artist's work and passing it out as your own, right?
Does this sound familiar? You're in a leadership role at a game studio. Everyone is busy working, no one has any time, but the actual game itself, isn't in a good spot. Maybe it's the tech, maybe it's the lack of a validated prototype, maybe it's that every person seems to have a different idea about what we're trying to build. But you've got a job. There are reports to send, meetings to schedule and facilitate, the occasional season of performance reviews to go through. And everyone is always so busy. When you step back, it makes you wonder if everyone is just going to keep slowly walking towards the abyss until the project or game fails. Is this what it means to be a leader in games? In tech? To endlessly repeat the same sequence of meetings without really moving the needle? To spend hours trying to get Jira tickets and dashboards where they should be? To pretend that everything is fine when you know deep down it really isn't? It doesn't have to be this way. You can make a difference. You can help your team and game succeed, but sometimes you need a bit of help to get there. I've started a game dev leadership accelerator. It aims to level up leaders who see opportunities to make a difference but don't know how to capitalize on them. We'll walk through what it means to lead well and give you tools to understand your organization's challenges and implement changes to overcome them. Game dev is hard. Knowing how to lead will give you an edge. It will still be hard, but you'll be ready to tackle it. If you're interested, let me know below, hit the link. I hope to see you in the accelerator, because I believe better leaders will help teams make better games, and I look forward to someday playing what you create.
What do you think of, if I devil's advocate that for a moment? What do you think about the fact that, hey, if Studio Ghibli owned this style, one of the things I'm trying to figure out is, do you trademark a style? And it's a very interesting question. I don't, because that
technically we can't protect style. That's a funny thing. But yes, it's there.
It's theirs. So, like, maybe is that a legal innovation needs to happen? But that would be wild. I don't think you could pull that off. I don't even know how you. It's hard enough getting everybody to understand the same style inside of a company. But you could argue that Studio Ghibli had this style and it was unique to them, and it was very obvious in the old world when someone had imitated them. I mean, it still was, but they had this unique style. And if you liked that style, you got it from Studio Ghibli. And when everybody just saturated the market with it, like you said, the value went down. And my question is, well, did Studio Ghibli's value go down when everybody became saturated with this? Where, like, now the fact that they had the style and it was unique, and now that everybody sort of overwhelmed themselves, like overate Studio Ghibli for 4 weeks, does that actually lower the value of Studio Ghibli and hit their bottom line? I don't know the answer to that.
So it's a very good question. It's a very good question. Do you feel like it devalued Studio Ghibli's IP and style?
No,
what's your
in fact,
I'm curious about.
So as I think through it, I'll honestly say I don't know. I could see an argument where we would say, hey, studio, now if they actually made something, people might assume it's AI. And so
Mm-hmm.
that would be a hit to them. Or they might go like, oh, I've seen a lot of that style. That's not as interesting to me.
I
The
see
other
what you
thing
mean.
that might have happened, though, and
Mm-hmm.
again, this is like in Studio Ghibli's favor, maybe they became the origin of this thing. And when everybody saw the style everywhere, they were like, this is a really cool style. Let me go check out Studio Ghibli things. And so
Mm-hmm.
I could see it working either way. I don't know what actually happened there.
I'm a more, I would say I'm a generally fairly optimistic person around these kind of things. I'm not gonna say this is what happened. I don't know. I know that when you generate this kind of content, you have to use the actual name of the creator, so Ghibli, and I suppose that it probably exposed a lot of people to what that is. What is Ghibli? Um, has it helped them or not? I don't know. Even if it did, that was not. I'll say that it's without their own consent, which is a problem anyways. Even if it's it ends up helping the
Sure.
IPs and the studio. Um, but yeah, I would say like look, given the fact that it blew up, a lot of people were exposed to it, and it just disappeared because something else, or like it just doesn't have the same. And maybe it's because I'm a Studio Ghibli fan. I really love their work, and I just I don't I don't feel like this would hurt them. If anything, that's like creating visibility. Some people maybe would get into what they're doing. People who know, it doesn't change much. Some people will be angry, but again, like we moved on. Like there is no more like Ghibli fight stuff.
Right.
That's kind
Yeah.
of over. And
Yeah.
then someone making a film, like let's assume for a second that someone would make an AI film entirely generated with the style of Ghibli. Well, they would not be the first ones to make a film in the style of Ghibli. There has been films made in the style of Ghibli that were not made by Ghibli and without AI, right? So yeah, it may just become easier. But I have a counter argument to these things, which is my personal opinion, which is that when things are kind of easy to reproduce, I think it makes the things that are harder to make by hand more valuable. And I do think that it ends up making Ghibli and their style and their stories and their narrative and their brand, everything that composes, Ghibli, actually a lot more valuable. It's going to be probably very difficult in the next, 5-10 years for entertainment content, because as you mentioned, like at some point anyone can create pretty much anything. But I think at the end it will make probably the more crafty and handmade stuff a lot more valuable and valued than what it is right now. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's
Yeah.
what I believe.
Yeah. Oh, dude, this is interesting. Because again, I'll be honest, personally, I've gone back and forth. Like I can see at the individual level the like, hey, I created something, you're using it in your model.
Yeah.
That feels bad to me that I don't get
Mm-hmm.
anything for the fact that you just use my stuff. That's also a very intractable problem, again, based on how LLMs function and sort of the
Yeah.
scale of it. Um, uh, just to track it all back to even like it's difficult to build a model that attributes, and once you do, what do you even do with that
Mm-hmm.
attribution? Because if you start paying, then suddenly the model becomes more expensive, and again we run into this
Yeah.
problem. And I can see the other side of it, which is if this is a technology that is just a game changer, right? If like basically this just
Mm-hmm.
changed the industry, this changed not just in game development or art, but like broadly, limiting access to it or limiting what it can do is a liability that may have greater consequences. It's weird. I think it's messing with a lot of ideals. It's messing with a lot of intuitions. And I go back and forth. It's a really, really tough one
Yeah.
for me because I use it.
It's
No, go ahead.
no, I was going to say it's a strange concept to say, look, if you want this model to be more usable for your own purpose, like creating your own content, reproducing your own style, you need a very smart model. For it to be very smart and effective, you need it to be trained on as much content as possible so it understands the patterns and what composes different styles. And like it's just like removing content from the training process, and the data set just makes it dumber and makes it less usable. And that's where I think it's a very practical perspective that I have on that, which is like training on everything and look at what people do with it and that's what we want to police.
Police
That's what we want
output.
to look at.
So where do you see the moral, like you've already mentioned some, but like, okay,
Mhm.
again, looking at the morality of AI, for you, genie's out of the bottle, train it on everything so that it's the most effective
Yeah.
model it can be, and so that you don't lose an advantage relative to other people in the world, other studios, other developers, because they will if you don't.
Mhm.
Just again, like there's a slippery slope in there that's like a little
Yes.
terrifying.
Yeah.
But so police the output. What do you consider immoral use of AI models? Like, what are the principles that you're using to help guide, make sure that you
Yeah.
feel like, okay, we're doing this in a way that
Mhm.
respects and honors the world that we live in and the people that are doing the work?
Yeah. So there are a few things. One, we don't internally. I don't think we've ever replaced anyone with AI. Like what we're proposing is use AI to your advantage as an employee. What do you do every day? What is it that you could potentially automate? What is it that you know is more of a, mm, you know, like how do you call that? Type of work that you can look at and be like, this part I don't really enjoy doing it. This part I would love to spend more time on that. Let's see what you can do with the part that you don't really like and automate that part. Um, just like finding your own solutions that serve yourself. That's one. There's no reason for me. There's absolutely no reason to ask anyone to go because I want to replace them with an AI or anything like this. What I want is just people in the company to be just like, I know how to use that. I know how to, make my life easier. I know how to be more productive with it. If productivity is what matters most, maybe it's quality that matters more. Maybe it's like reducing the dependability that others have on me. I can provide them with a tool that can help with that. Like, great, like all that stuff is super valid for me. And then from a like, um, you know, let's say content, IP, like all these perspective, like we fine tune, right? Like whatever we do is design, is crafted. We fine tune the models on our IP, on our content. We never use the models vanilla without any, as I said, like tuning of any sort. And that's kind of the way I would say we're making sure that we're not using someone else's, content or IP. So we're still like designers, right? Like on the art team, like the artist, whatever they're doing, even if they're more technical now, even if they use prompting, they prompt models that have been fine tuned to their work. So that's kind of like the way we're approaching this.
So you basically take the everything model. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
I'm clear on this. You take the everything model, you
mhm,
put constraints around it, either by feeding it
that's
specific
correct.
things, and then you fine tune it so that what you're going to get out is something that like
Yep.
we built this style. This is not,
Yes.
this is not accidentally copying anything else in some, unless if, and again, any more than it would have if our style had happened to imitate something else
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
prior to
Then that's
AI.
intent, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly right. I should have sorry, yeah, that's true. Not everyone is aware of what fine tuning is, but you explained it perfectly well. It's like guardrails and making sure that we stay within that frame, within that style, which is usually ours. That's the idea.
Okay. Um, so then for you, people who are directly copying, like, yeah, like you said, like that stuff, hey, that's a no-go. We don't want to do that. We don't want to get in that space. Okay.
Mhm.
Related topic, and I know we spent a long time on this one, but I appreciate
No,
your
that's all right.
sticking
I
with
mean,
me.
this is it's a very important topic, and it's been debated. Like, for we started using AI about 3 years ago now, and that was the first thing that we discussed within the team. Like, how do we use that and make sure that we're all artists. We have people on the team who worked on Disney products. We're doing visual development for this. Like, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing with this is okay by our own morality and standards as artists and as visual developers. And we landed on something that works for us. I'm not saying like that works for everyone, but it works for us.
Yeah. I view morality and legality as two different things. I think it's
Yeah.
dangerous to try to legislate all morality. So legally, what are the challenges
Mhm.
that we're seeing? How do you see that space developing? Again, I assume this is something you're thinking about quite a bit as
Yeah.
someone who's like trying to guide this process, because even if you're like, okay, cool, I've come up with a position, it's somewhat pragmatic, but I believe it follows good principles and it leads to good outcomes, like generally like leads to human flourishing, let's say. Um,
Yeah.
but legality is a totally different thing. And sometimes that might be it might give you different constraints. Maybe I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I think there are two. kind of like from a legal perspective, I mean, we're all the same from a legal perspective, but there are like maybe two big perspectives camps. Like, for large companies, they will have to be a lot more careful about their use of AI and in what parts of their products they would use AI, because legally speaking, as you said, it's kind of a gray area still. There is no clarity around like when a machine produces something, who is the owner of that piece of work? When an LLM produces content, is part of the ownership to, the data set that contributed to training? Or is that to the person who generated the content, or is that to the machine and the model maker? So the people who built that, foundation model, like where does it lie? And there is no answer to this. There is a partial answer to the fact that, for example, with Midjourney, there was a group of artists that, brought Midjourney to a legal battle, and the end of that was the artists were asking for their content to be removed from Midjourney's data set and to be, compensated, I believe, for what was done. And the judge, I think the outcome was say like, well, yes, your work has been used, but there is no compensation to be expected here because, like the nature of the model is it's not designed to reproduce your work. It is capable of reproducing your work because it's been trained on it as well. But, they could not essentially get their work removed. And similarly, someone using, that was also with Midjourney, in their content, tried to copyright the work that they were doing. And same thing, it's been refused. Like, you can't copyright the work being done with AI right now. So there is not, and I think this is interesting, and there's reason for that. No one wants to set a precedent that says, yes, it is copyrightable, or yes, you should be, compensated for the work, your work that has been used to train the model, because in both cases that would kind of get in the way of, I would say, like, national progress. Like, that would set a precedent that could be very problematic for everyone. So from that perspective, we know it's gray. We know there is a risk. We know there is a possibility that at some point, there's a decision made that says like, well, it is copyrightable, or it's not, or you should be paid for, your data being there, or your data should be removed, whatever it is. That would definitely affect larger companies using AI right now a lot more, especially if it's, integrated in the core products or whatnot. Smaller companies like us, we need to update a product because we have a piece of content that is problematic in there or whatever it is. Like, we can do that very quickly. I'm not suggesting to, take risks or anything. But I would say that we can tolerate risk around this. Like, if at some point there is clarity around copyright ownership and all that stuff, we can adjust very quickly and do whatever we need to do. Larger companies, that would be a lot harder. And so I think from that perspective, I know that's not an answer about the legality of things. Like,
yeah, but it's an answer of the constraints that you operate in, right?
Yeah.
It sounds
exactly.
like, look, I'm looking at the lawsuits. I'm seeing the cases. I'm seeing where judges are falling on this. And the precedent, I'll stay within the precedents that I see being set.
Yeah.
And I'm small enough that if a new precedent is set that is disruptive, I can adjust. And that's kind of where I'm at, because, as you said, to some extent, this is the legal space around this is just so wide open and undefined right now.
And I think it will remain that way for a while again, like, I think macroeconomic competitiveness reasons.
Right.
I don't think America
almost
is
like
going to...
there's a geopolitical reality here that's guiding how the world is relating to this.
Yes. And I think, so I can't remember when that was exactly, but I think there was a time where the American government was looking into maybe regulating, policing OpenAI and the work that they were doing. And that just disappeared because they realized very quickly, I suppose that's what happened. I don't know what happened behind the scene, but I suppose they realized very quickly, well, if we're doing this, like, our nation is not going to be competitive against, China, or I'm not going to say Europe. Europe has actually a massive problem around AI and being competitive there, but like, that's going to be potentially a problem. And it disappeared. Like, we're not hearing about this anymore at all. Like, OpenAI can do whatever they want. They created this video model called Sora that launched
Yep.
version 2 that launched
Yep.
recently.
Part two. Yeah.
You could use anybody's likeness. You could make videos about anyone with anything. At some point, they introduced, okay, we should have some guardrails. That was, I think this is a marketing stunt, but like now there are guardrails. You can only use the likeness of someone who accepts, that you would use. That's called Cameo, I think. But yeah, I really don't see from a practical perspective, it's a risk to say that. I understand, but I really don't see any legal position being taken by any nation right now that would put at risk their competitive advantage with AI. So I don't think they're going to police, model makers.
Again, almost coming back to the practical reality. It's interesting whenever I look at geopolitics. I'm always like, man, morality and legality get really weird when you're talking about different nations that all have different norms, cultures, standards around how they might approach this.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are outcomes like, oh, well, you were willing to go do that horrible thing, but if I'm not also willing to go do that horrible, now I'm not saying AI is a horrible thing, but
Mm-hmm.
like because I'm not able to do that, does that give you an advantage? And there are some things where we say, I think maybe this is the counter argument is,
Mm-hmm.
look, even if they're willing to go do the horrible thing, let's say the AI is a horrible thing, they're willing to go do that. We still shouldn't do it because it's wrong to do horrible things. And I think now then we have to come back to the morality question at the first point, which is like,
Yeah.
is it a horrible thing? Because if it is a horrible thing, we shouldn't do it, even if it gives them an advantage, right? If some nation out there was doing like horrible, like testing on human subjects to try to gain advantages and build super soldiers or something, and you're like, oh, we need to do that too so that they don't get better super soldiers than us. It would be like, no, we would not want to do horrible testing on human beings because we find that to be morally wrong, and we accept that they might get a super soldier advantage from blah blah blah, right? Whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna do it in a way that honors our moral frame, but
Mm-hmm.
again, it's predicated on the idea, the moral question: is what AI does to creative work, to artistic work, to the world of the historically starving artist, right? Is that actually a horrible thing? And that's where you get like, it sounds like your answer is no, it's not horrible. It is an advance, and we need to adapt to it. And I think for other people, the answer is no, it's horrible. And even if it costs us something, even if we fall
Yeah.
behind, we should not engage with it. And it's like, yeah, but oh boy, like it really needs to be horrible for it that you do not want to do that. It really needs to be horrible for you to be willing to fall behind.
Yeah. Only the future can tell, right? Like I think right now it's a more question of faith in what we think we can do as human with the technology. And for me, a very simple example of this is when you see a company laying off thousands of people because of AI. It's not because of AI, because there are companies that make these decisions. It's companies that decide that for maybe competitiveness reasons or whatnot, we're going to lay off all these people. And maybe it's because they had hired too many people in the first place to do the work that they're doing. They took too many risks. And now they're like, we have to do risk because we're not going to be competitive. But it's not, again, for me, like that's not because of AI. AI is a technological shift. It has an impact, but that's not the reason people are fired. It's the reason they're fired is because these companies have taken major risks with hiring and the way they've developed, the whole business. Sometimes it's even a bit conflated. Like, I don't know if conflated is the right word, but a few months back, there were again like massive layoff, from Amazon and whatnot. And a lot of this was attributed to AI when in fact, a lot of it was, still like people that were hired during the COVID period. And, well, we don't order as much as before when you're home. And, maybe they had like other part of the business that were not as performing, but now we're kind of assuming it's always because of AI. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's just a piece of tech. It's just moving so fast that it's really hard to adapt. It's really hard to know if we're making the right decisions. It's very difficult to know if we're future proof. That's hard to tell, even when you're using it. but ultimately it's people making decisions. It's people like deciding if they're going to let go, 10,000 people or two or none. I hear the argument that like, oh, because of AI, people are losing their job and it's AI is bad and everything. But I was saying like, it's still people like signing these things and deciding, what to do with these workers and not giving them a future. I mean, like,
Yeah. For me, there's AI is so prevalent right now, and I do see some decent percentage of the AI market on an economic level as a bubble. I think that
oh
bubble is
yeah,
going to burst at some point, and I think
yeah.
there's going to be something left that was actually useful and could become profitable and is very helpful. And then there's going to be a lot of stuff that just like vanishes into the ether, potentially causing like quite a crash in the tech sector. I saw Nvidia was just at the time of recording, they just crossed like 5 trillion in valuation, which is just like insane. It's like it's absurd. Um,
Mhm.
but I this idea that you're describing is because AI is so prevalent in everyone's consciousness and awareness, it becomes the boogeyman. When I see something happen that I don't
Yes.
like, it's easy to attribute it. Where in fact, around those Amazon layoffs you talked about, some of it may be
Mhm.
they invested a ton of money into games. Games are high risk. They have decided after some number of years of this that and again, this wasn't all of it. It wasn't all in games, but some of it was. They have decided after some amount of time that, like, you know what, this gaming thing isn't working out for us. This is not profitable. This is actually harder to break into than we thought. Whatever their reasons are,
Yeah.
whatever the things that they're saying inside are, um, and AI sort of gets slipped in, maybe not even by Amazon, but by those who see it and say, like, oh, they must think like AI is going to solve that problem. And it may just be, we don't like these bets anymore. We don't like this risk that we took, to your point. Is AI a contributor? Perhaps. Is AI an excuse? Perhaps. It's that thing of it's hard to get away from it right now.
You mentioned earlier the AI bubble, and I think that's what we're kind of talking about in some ways, where um, the fear of not being positioned well with the shift that is happening triggers potentially a lot of these, layoffs and restructurations. And that's like as a reaction to something that we don't even understand right now, that we're not sure what the impacts would be. But we know as a large company, we know that we want to be in a good position, if something happens. And there is and this is something else. And this is very people working in AI, I think is something that you can feel when you're this is you always kind of feel that someone else has discovered something. Someone else is like sitting on like some secret, model that's gonna give them a massive advantage or whatever. That's not really the case. Everyone is working kind of like the same pace, and everything is always converging in the same place. Um, be it OpenAI or Anthropic, or even like models like visual image generation models. They kind of like move at the same pace. They kind of come up with the same features. And whenever one has one feature, the other one just comes up with like something very similar very quickly. And not that like copying the others. It means that they were working on the same thing, because there is kind of like a natural progression and natural convergence of different type of research and capabilities. And so it's like, no, there's no one that has like a very like a super secret sauce, something that they're keeping. But there is still this sense, again, because we don't really understand the technology, even when we work in the field. We don't have a full understanding of the potential of it, even. Like, we're very close, but we're like, what's really, like, we just scratch the surface, and it goes so fast that we're always wondering if we're working on the right thing, and if we're using it properly. And I think this is, going back to the legality of things and the risks and all that stuff. I think this is a much easier landscape to navigate as a small company, and adjust and taking like all these new models, do updates, build on that infrastructure, no problem, right? As a larger company, it's very difficult to navigate, very difficult to understand the impact, very difficult to project. And I think, yeah, it does trigger like some kind of like fear, or even like the opposite, a bubble, like where you feel like this is going to be amazing, this is going to change everything, like, you know,
Right, right.
crazy visions, right?
We've talked about morality. We've talked about legality. Anything else you want to say on either of those two topics? Because you've got some
Yeah,
controversial takes
actually,
here.
I can add a little bit, like, again, from a very practical perspective on the legality side of things and how people navigate that. I can see a shift very recently. So I mentioned we're kind of we've been working on our own tool for close to 3 years now. And we're thinking of productizing. And because of that, I'm asking for feedback from friends or other companies that, may be interested by that. And so it's cross industry. So I'm talking creative agencies like similar. I'm not gonna name them, but like similar to Leo Burnett or like these kind of like large ads companies, advertisement companies, or game studios, publishers, smaller devs as well. Like I have a lot of like indie dev as friends. They don't hate me. They understand where I'm coming from. We still talk to each other, but they don't use AI. I'm just checking in, right? And what I'm seeing, especially around the larger studios, there used to be a complete allergy to using AI because of the kind of like not knowing if this would be regulated or not, if there's like, and they can see what happened with the kind of like the gray area that is just maintained. There's a status quo. It's just, I don't think this is going to move. And they see the same thing. Now they're starting to use a lot of AI in their production in areas that are more kind of like temporary in a way. I don't know how to express that better, but like social media content, it's there for a few days, goes away. Live ops is one of them where I was like, oh, okay, so like you're starting to get stuff in your products. Yeah. So live ops, and I'm talking about very large publishers, right? Like they're not afraid of using, content in places where they're not core to the actual experience, and they can fix it if there is an issue. Okay, we just remove that content, replace it, fine, no problem. And I see a lot of it. So it's a very big shift compared to, I would say, maybe a year ago, even, where I was even talking to creative production agencies, so people making games assets for larger companies. The directive from all of the larger companies that were ordering from them was, do not ever use AI because we need to know exactly what goes into our product.
Yeah.
Do not. And I was surprised at the time because I was working on this tool, and I was like, oh, you guys would be probably interested in like kind of UI, like all these things that help with, production. Is like, no, we can't touch that. That has completely changed.
Yeah, I actually I just saw a note that some major first-person shooter titles that are coming out around the recording of this video, that people can probably guess what they are because this is being recorded in late October. But they now have little disclaimers, I think, on Steam or somewhere that basically says like, "Hey, AI was used in the creation of this." And
Right.
I think to your point, there is the appetites there. I think there were two questions actually. One was what was the legal situation going to be, and the second was what was the player perception going to be.
Yeah.
Fragpunk was one of the first games that really went out there and had AI generated cosmetic assets
Mm-hmm.
that it was pushing. And they, in some ways, you could argue like they really got hit by that on the review bomb side. Like a lot of people were pretty upset. But the question is, with that anger from some number of players who are against AI in their games, the games that they play,
Mm-hmm.
did that actually negatively impact Fragpunk's trajectory? I would say probably did, but was that because they were too early? And is that perception from players going to eventually become right? I'll be honest, like I would be surprised if forget art for a second, on the engineering side, there are not just massive AI use of or sorry, engineering use of AI across game development for game engineers just all over the place. Because frankly, AI has absolutely
Yeah.
infiltrated into that space, even if it's just like inline complete stuff. But like the way that they're using models,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just across the entire engineering space, like coding, software programming space, is just, it's not that you have to use AI necessarily, but
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very, very common. And I would assume that is true in game development as well. So I think it's sort of this thing of like, hey, yeah, we're in some way, shape, or form, nowadays games
Yeah.
are being generated with AI and players are going to become acclimated to that, even if Fragpunk took a hit because it did it too soon or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So like there are kind of like two parts to this. Like I do believe that frag sales got affected by this when, you're listed on a platform where reviews matter, ratings really matter, and you get hammered. That's, and also the audience cares, even if it's maybe not, it could be not a large number of people, but enough to, hurt your business. Yeah, that I think, yeah, they suffered from that for sure. Um, I come kind of more from the mobile side of things. Consumers don't care. They just care about the experience. They don't really care about was AI used or not used. They care about, am I going to have fun for the next, 10 minutes when I'm doing my, game session, or I'm commuting or whatever. And I think it's just, most of the content these days, particularly around, live ops and, marketing app store screenshots, like especially, app store screenshots. I don't know how familiar you are with the art of ASO, which is like optimizing for the app store by changing your, content and pictures and copy, very often, kind of like to fight a little bit like ad fatigue, right? Like similarly to that, and also just test, what is performing best right now? Is this series of image or change? Or sometimes you also want to make seasonal stuff, right? It's like Christmas, then you're gonna theme your content. All of that is absolutely AI generated these days because it's pretty straightforward to do.
Mm-hmm.
Again, consumers don't care. So, we're talking about the programming side of things. It's very interesting. I have a experience that I think has been a core. Like in the last few weeks, I've been talking to those different developers. Somehow, engineering has been a little slower to take on the kind of like the use of AI. A little bit for the same reasons as artists, which is we generally, as programmers or artists, we want to be in control of what we're doing. We want to understand what's being run by the machine. We want to make sure that the code is of good quality and efficient and everything. And for the longest time, it is true that context has been an issue with AI, especially with programming, where when you ask model to, let's say, for example, implement authentication, I want authentication implemented right now for that particular game using this particular SDK or whatever, it would probably fail. But we got to a point now where it is capable of reading the documentation properly, keeping it in context, and reading the different like guidance that is rules that are required, and then testing on the back of that. Like all these things that were very, very hard, I would say like a year ago, now are pretty common. So I'm assuming that everyone is kind of using AI for a lot of these very fundamental and kind of a little repetitive, tasks, or even refactoring, for example. It's like one of the longest things that you have to do when you're coding. It's like at some point, like, oh, I need to redo a bunch of my code here. Well, AI really helps with that. It used to be useless, but that's not the case anymore. And again, particularly on mobile, it's always been a very strong focus of mobile companies to reduce the cost of development. It's a little different from AAA and consultants. Yes, there's a concern with that, but it's not as strong as on the mobile side.
It should have been a bigger concern than it was.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. But it's the game industry. So mobile has its own reputation, and I've worked on both. I've worked on PC, console, and mobile, and I remember very well when I switched to mobile and free to play, the kind of look that people would give me on the console and PC side, like, "What? This is dirty," And I understand. I know exactly where people are coming from with this. I get I get where this is coming from, but yeah, it's always been a very big focus on mobile, like being very efficient in terms of development cost, and I think that's probably also consumers don't, as I said, consumers don't really care how the sausage is made compared to PC and console.
Yeah. Again, I think my belief is over time players will become less and less concerned as they see those little disclaimers in more and more products and don't dive into how that is. And especially to your point, like I know an engineer right now who when he creates something, finds some bugs through some sort of testing, his first response to that, and this isn't a very small project, sort of a hobby project, but he'll just spin up however many Claude code instances he needs to basically give a first shot at the bugs. And he's like, look, it hits about 30% of the time. But when it hits, it just means, okay, cool, that one's done, right? And he's reviewing the code, he's reviewing the output to make sure it's like, okay, cool, yep, that actually did it, and the bug is fixed. And when it's not fixed, he makes a call of like, do I just tell it it's not fixed and this is what happened and have it go again, or do I go in and try to solve that bug myself? But because he can run multiple of them simultaneously, he can sort of attack a whole set of things at once.
Exactly.
And with a 30% close rate, it's just like, well, now I don't have to worry about those ones. Now I don't have to worry about those ones. And all I'm doing is reviewing
Yeah.
what it's kicking out. And it's there's some engineer out there that's probably like, just either angry or like terrified of that's what's going on. But again, small hobby project, something not that big, not that big a deal. Doesn't have a huge impact and does dramatically speed the removal of those bugs from the build.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like the engineer is out of control, right? It's like, it's up to them. They can decide, as you said, like, am I going to fix it myself? Am I going to let the machine do it and then check? And I mean, it's always to me, it's always the same thing. It's like, it's down to the people, right? It's down to the intent that we have in relation to our own work, in relation to other IPs, like what kind of work do we do? And, yeah, as an engineer, if you use the tool, you check if the code is good, if everything is done according to your own directions. I mean, there are ways to guide your model, and maybe like there's a particular, I don't know, structure that you want to use or whatever it is, and all of that is something that I think any proper engineer would just review, right? And to be frank, I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, vibe coding is horrible. And vibe coding can mean different things to different people. For some people, it's like, I don't know anything about anything and I just let the machine do. Others are like, I'm an engineer. I know exactly what's going on. I just let the machine have a go and I guide it and then I review and then I fix, exactly what you described. I'm like, again, a proper engineer is not going to ship crappy code, even if they use a machine. I don't really, I don't
Right.
see that happening. Like, people care about their craft. They're not doing random stuff. So yeah, of course, there are people doing, as I said, like vibe coding stuff without knowing anything about anything. But again, that's
Right.
not the majority of the engineers, right?
Here's the concern I have in that space
Yeah.
is that once people realize, oh, you can go that fast. Okay, I now expect you to always go that fast. And when you do that
Mm-hmm.
now, even though I am an engineer who has a deep concern for code quality and
Yeah.
the long-term stability of basically the
Yeah.
foundation of the technology that whatever what it is we're building of our product, I
Yeah.
I am now forced by the system to some extent, or at least massively incentivized by the system to not do
Mm-hmm.
my due diligence, to just let the code generate whatever it does and run forward. Because in the same way that tech debt has accumulated and we've been talking about tech debt for decades now, right? AI is a massive risk factor when it comes to tech debt.
Yeah.
And if people are just like, look, all that matters is productivity, the hilarity of lines of code as a metric in the AI world is obviously now just like disproves that as something
Makes no
viable
sense.
completely. But
Yeah.
but the idea of like, hey, how many tickets are you closing? If I'm in a ticket factory, through whatever my work system is, Jira or otherwise,
Yes.
then if all I'm trying to do is run tickets through the board, run tickets, run tickets, run tickets, run tickets,
Yeah.
and everything is built around that from an incentives perspective, you're going to have even good engineers going like, okay, whatever, I guess this is what they want from me. And you're going to end up with something very dangerous, I guess. And I think to your point, though, this is still comes back to humans, the culture they create, the things that they allow. Because my guess is inside of that system, there were some engineers who were probably sticking their hand up and saying like, hey, this is a bad idea. We shouldn't do like it is better when we apply our expertise into this
Yeah.
space. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling on here, but
No, I think this is a very important point because there is this assumption that people are, I mean, it depends on the companies, right? I do feel like for most of us, we're still to an extent in control of what we're doing. We can have these conversations. We can show, there are people who are also engineers who are in charge of engineering teams and can, kind of be the shield for the team and explain, no, this is not the way it works. Like, yes, there are places where it makes us go faster, but maybe you take another project and it doesn't help us at all because whatever, maybe like the kind of language being used, the kind of infrastructure, the services, like maybe AI is not ready for that. That's possible. But for this other project, yes, that actually helped us, made us go faster. Um, these conversations they can happen if we take a place, and I agree with you, like if you're working in a place where there is none of these conversations happening, you're just like essentially like, as I said, like counting the number of tickets that you can close. And like, yes, ultimately it means like people have no kind of ownership or agency, or we don't allow them to have agency. We don't allow them, like, yes, I agree. It will lead to very bad outcome, but as I said, it's like, it's kind of down to the culture of these places.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think again, it just accelerates what's already there because
exactly.
if you're a ticket factory, you could have been a ticket factory before AI. So AI made you a faster ticket factory, so you're making a bigger pile of tech debt at a
That's
much
correct.
faster rate. But you were already a ticket factory.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Wow.
And that's the very good point. Like, it accelerates in both ways. Right? You can accelerate in a good way or in a terrible way. But yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Which it's kind of the reason I really believe that. Again, using AI or whatever tool that would be, right? We're talking about AI here, like having strong values, principles, and making sure that your team, has the space and the level of ownership and agency that they need in order to be able to move in this kind of environment, and they're being trusted also with what they're saying. Like, I don't believe for a second that people are lazy. Everyone is working really hard. Everyone wants to work on stuff that they love. And if they have the space to do that and they have the right project, it doesn't matter whatever tool they use, AI or not AI, they're not lazy. They're doing good work. And I, I don't really, I haven't seen a lot of people that were seemingly lazy because that was just their nature. Usually it's the culture and the place that they were working in and the kind of space that was given to them that would just like, well, whatever, man, like whatever I say, whatever I do has no impact. So why would I even speak up? And at this I understand, again, culture issue, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
There's an
actually,
analogy. One, what you just said, there's a W.E. Deming quote, a bad system beats a good person every time. And I think this is like you said, it's AI is an accelerant on a bad system.
yes,
Potentially. The other thing that's
exactly.
coming to my brain, as an analogy for this is actually the invention of X-ray technology. So most of us have received an X-ray at some point in our lives. In the Western world, like, maybe you broke a bone, or maybe someone needed to check something, and they were just doing some diagnostics. You take an X-ray, and when they do it, the person puts on the big lead suit because they're around the X-ray machines all the time, and they go behind in a little room off to the side, and they put you out, and they for just the smallest possible time they can, they expose you to an X-ray, even though we know that exposure to X-rays is actually dangerous to humans, but the cost of us diagnosing whatever your concern is or issue, or like letting the doctor see if the bone is broken or not, or whatever it is a net positive. Yeah. However, when we first developed X-rays, we didn't know this. And many of the early people who developed X-rays ended up getting cancers from exposure to radiation. And so I'm going like, we now have figured out how to use X-rays in a way where the benefit is worth the cost. And I think when I look at AI, I just go, we haven't solved all these things. So some people are standing in front of X-ray machines, basically making a mess of their code base or whatever it is, damaging themselves, their company in ways that they did not expect as they experiment with a new tool, a new experiment. Fortunately, hopefully AI isn't, going to kill them, cause them to have cancer or something like that. But there is this, like, we're figuring out where are the lines that help this be useful. And I think that's made even more complicated by the fact that the space is changing so much. There's so much shift happening that if we had all the prompt guidance that everybody gave you 3 years ago is no longer as relevant.
Clearly. Yeah.
It's just like, if you watch a video, even of we did a podcast with somebody from a few years ago, and I think there's still some good tidbits in there about like broad approach, but I'm guessing a lot of the specific guidance is probably totally out of date. Like, no, you don't need to do that anymore. They just built that into the model because everybody was doing it, so they were just built it in, and that sort of thing. And so it's an interesting one. Like, and so you don't want to be the one who's standing in front of the X-ray machine, but simultaneously you don't know what that is for AI right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm a pretty optimistic person, as I mentioned. I believe in human nature, and but I'm not also denying the fact that there is a real potential danger, and I'm not saying like just for jobs, but also like for our general like well-being on the planet, right? We don't know. There are concerns, and they're very valid concerns, and I'm not denying them or anything. I think I'm still applying the same kind of logic, which is, again, like, we have it now and it's being developed in our countries, being developed in other countries. I'm I don't think there's anyone who's going to, sit down and be like, let's just hold hands and stop doing whatever we're doing. Like there's been asked of that, like we should stop, we'll building AI and avoid building AGI. I don't think this is something that these different countries, these nations feel like they can afford at all. And in these kind of situations, like you go back to like, what is that can drive us, like our principles, right? Like that's the best possible thing that we can do is like, is this aligned with the way we would normally do things by our own principles and values? And if it's not, then, okay, maybe we have to revisit that. People doing bad things will do bad things with AI, not AI. As you said, AI is probably going to accelerate all of that.
Mhm.
But,
Yeah.
I don't have like, I'll say that. I don't have a position on because you were talking about um the positive aspects, right, that should outweigh hopefully the negative potential of the thing. I'm quite how to say that, I'm not too worried, to be very frank. At this point of time we still have, I mean, you look at what we're doing with visuals or whatnot, there's still issues. There's like, we haven't figured out 3D. We haven't it's still very basic. It goes very fast, but it's still very basic. So I don't think we're going to have a point where, AGI is going to be out there and then it's going to be, the end of the world and Skynet is here, or whatnot. Like, I don't really believe that. And I think we're seeing progress in places like, you just mentioned X-ray. It's one of the places like medical imagery where we're seeing a lot of progress. And I think it's very important developing, new medicines and kind of like fast tracking the discovery process. And I mean, I feel like this is incredibly important. And I'm not saying like this excuses everything else that you could do with AI that could be bad, right? But like, yeah, I mean, it's just like, maybe I'm optimistic. I'm not this person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Optimism is dangerous. No, I think that's
Yes.
good. I think you need both, right? Okay, so
I'm a cautious optimist.
let's come back into game dev for a second.
Yeah.
Because there are some other topics, but I'm cognizant of the time. We've
No,
talked
no.
a bit about engineering,
Mhm.
and I kind of want to run through the ideas of, you've been helping guide this. Now you're an art director who became a technical art
Mhm.
director, so you have some technical chops, you've got some artistic chops. I'm
Mhm.
curious, how are you actually seeing this tool help engineers and
Mhm.
artists be more effective at producing things the players want to play?
Right. Right. Um, I think there is I'll be very frank. I think there is maybe an even more important aspect on top of making things that players want to play.
Hmm.
They're making sure that the players are aware of the product, because we
Hmm.
can make the best possible game if we don't
Yep,
have the right
that's the
approach.
two-headed beast. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If we are missing that piece, like, we just made an awesome game, but no one's playing it. Um, and so, yeah, I think AI contributes to both. At least the way we work with AI in the studio, it helps us testing ideas very quickly. So on the engineering side of things, what we call vibe coding, we can call that whatever we want, but like AI aided coding, that actually helps us with just testing either prototypes of, different products very quickly with an audience. So now we're calculating like how much time does it take for us to, have an idea, getting people to play. Even if it's a very like MVP prototypey version of the product. Similarly for features, um, it has become, and that was very important, very quick for us to look at data, look at how players play, look at player feedback, look at, community sentiment, like all these things, and then integrate that into either an update of the product or a feature, whatever it is that we want to build. Again, like getting real player data as fast as possible. The thing that has the reason this is very important for us is that it's probably the thing that tripped us the most in the past is working on something for too long before players actually experience it and we realize, well, actually we were wrong. That's not what players really wanted. We thought that's what they wanted. We made it really nice and we polished it to an extent, and so we see the speed that brings AI. And in this case, even with the kind of like the quirks, like it's not super clean, it's not, production ready or whatever. That's okay, because all we want is to validate an idea. And if it's validated, go back to the drawing board, refactor whatever we need to refactor, make it production ready, and ship it. But at least we have this level of confidence that yes, actually, it does have the effect that we hoped. And if it doesn't, then learnings, go back to the drawing board, and then ship again. So more specifically on the development side of things, and I'll explain, like, there's a bit of a change in kind of the responsibility of the engineer and the artist as well. Engineers in the studio, there are two parts to engineering. One part is developing the core product, and as I said, like also developing like prototypes and early version of different features and whatnot. But it's like part of the core development. And there is another part of the work that the engineering team does, which is enabling anyone else in the studio to develop something and to ship it. So we're talking more about like actual vibe coding, and we have a particular product that we call VibeOps Stack, which is a highly framed and kind of on guardrailed kind of development environment for artists, designer, whoever, to use for them to test an idea very quickly. And we've done simple things with that ended up shipping. Like, for example, we built a rock, paper, scissors battle royale experience in chat, which is really funny. So you don't have an actual app. It's all done in text, 100 people playing against each other, like very fast turns. And then, at the end, one man standing. We've done something similar with choose your own adventure, battle royale as well. So every turn you have to pick one of the different directions that you can take, or make a choice. And then it eliminates a bunch of players. And then at the end, one person standing, or sometimes more, actually. And it's been all built by a designer with no coding experience whatsoever. But the system is framed in such a way that it's only capable of building chat-based experiences or web apps for Telegram. So it's very, very specific. But because it's so specific, a non-coder can actually provide, the feedback, the PRD, so like the product requirement document or the design document, and then the machine is kind of like building everything on the back, and they can iterate. So that has been for us, it's a game changer because of the kind of experiences that we build. We're not a AAA developer, on console or whatever. We make Telegram experiences, but now we have the ability, artist designers, to ship products and test them, and sometimes integrate them. So those two are live right now. We have a Minesweeper experience. It's very simple, actually, but that was shipped inside of one of our other products, done by an artist. And so, people are having fun. They're testing very quickly. We get feedback from the players, and that's quite instrumental. So in this case, part of the job of the engineer is to build systems to allow other people and elevate other people's work.
Yeah.
Similarly, artists have done the same thing. So artists they're doing visual development. So they're building the main assets, core asset, hero assets, the brand, the logo, all that stuff. Sometimes they use some AI, sometimes not. Generally, like, we're using a lot of AI, but it's not like, how do you call that? It's not like one button, or one prompt kind of stuff. It's like actual visual development. And then part of the role of the artist is to build solutions, often workflows that marketing can use. So we reduce the dependency that marketing has on production art, so that they can build content that is on brand, on model, that uses the right, colors, the right tone of voice, everything, but without having to get an artist to do it every time. And this has been working very, very well. So with a very small team of artists, now we can support like a bunch of different marketing channels, live ops as well, like all these things that usually require a team dedicated to run those things. And that's only because artists could build those tools and they could express kind of like the workflows that they want to provide the others with. We're using an agent for that. I know it's like a buzzword, and like everyone's like, agent. Like, yeah, it's an agent that has tools, and we can tell it exactly what we want to do, put that into a workflow, and give the workflow to someone else, and then they can just use it. And it's on brand and on model. So systems as well. They're building systems, and somehow the artists love that. I'm still surprised to this day. I'm like, I was expecting a not pushback, but just like, it's okay for a while, but at some point I don't really want to be writing system prompts and tool guidance and whatnot. But I think the fact that at least on this team, it's a bit particular. They're production artists with a problem-solving mindset. I think it's part of the fun for them to see what they can do with these tools. So as I said, they do both. They do visual development, but also do that. So same team. So I'm still surprised by how much they enjoy it. Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah. So you were talking there's two things. I actually like this framing a lot because core development all the way from ideation prototyping through like live service and support, like live ops stuff. And then I think the thing that often gets forgotten in game development studios, the actual how do we help people develop? And that's also an engineering responsibility. And so you've invested at Mighty Bear, you've invested a lot of time in trying to create ways for people to take advantage of AI and custom built AI tools that would build them things. Now, outside of making those sorts of agents that have enabled artists and engineers to kind of, run and go do some things, where have you seen the biggest wins in engineering or art around how fast people are able to move? You mentioned prototyping earlier. I think that's a pretty common one that people talk about, but like, where have you seen there just be like, hey, this has really shifted how effective team members are able to be?
So one is more product strategy related, and the other one is more on the team mindset. So on the product strategy side, and I talked about it a little earlier, the use of AI helps us kind of testing a lot more before actually building, and that has been like, it's very important. Not just like fast tracking production and everything, but even just how much time does it take to make a good decision, or at least something that we think is a good decision. And that helps us tremendously because, the most precious thing that we have is time, probably, as a company. Of course, it's related directly to, burn rate, but it's like, it's time. We have to make decisions. Everything that takes more time is kind of an opportunity cost, right? If we take 2 days to test something, and if we could have tested 2 things in these 2 days rather than 1, like, that's much better, right? And so, just making better decisions, more informed decisions, and getting to this level of confidence or validation quickly or faster. So that's one. And the second one, which is, as I said, like more cultural, like, and change in mindset within the team. So it's going back to what I think the roots of what AI really is for me. It's a tool to build tools. Like, it's something that you can use. A prompt is effectively kind of like an app, right? It's like a little thing, a little workflow that will do something for you. You can use it, or you can build it for someone else. Yeah. And you can go as far as you like. You can change the prompts, and you can add more context, and you can make it more maybe intelligent and more robust. And so what happened with this is that for both, like art, engineering, marketing, product, and design, they've started thinking a lot more in terms of, how can I reduce the dependence of another team on me, in terms of like, how can I not be a blocker and they can move forward without always like requiring my input? And how can I also make space for things that I think are more impactful in my work? And so for that, it's been instrumental. So we're not thinking anymore about like pure, I need to build this because this is what the product requires, but also, how can I help others, and how can I make the decisions that will compound in terms of how impactful they are over time? Because, again, I'm helping others, I'm helping my team. And it's not always going through AI, like, that's not that, but like the fact that AI as a tool, which is natural language programming, that made the change in mindset. And that's not something that I really expected when we started working with AI at all. I was not. Maybe that's also the reason why artists are like actually enjoying making these tools, because they're like, that's very useful, and people are, praising us for the stuff that we bring into their team, and they're super happy using our stuff. So, I think that's a major change in the studio.
Okay, so an analogy, I'm curious if you think this lines up. I view a leader's responsibility as setting up an environment, especially in spaces like game development, where there's a lot of experimentation and exploration and learning that has to happen. Your job is not to make all the decisions. Your job is to create an environment where good decisions can be made.
Yeah.
And the reason is because if you have to make all the decisions, it doesn't scale. What I heard you just say is something very similar, where we know we need this asset to solve this problem for our product.
Yeah.
I could go make that asset, but if I can figure out how to make something make that asset, or make something make that asset more easier to make, then I don't just solve today's problem. I solve a set of problems that I'm going to have, that we are going to have into the future.
Correct.
And that's like you said, that's the cultural shift, almost the product vision shift.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. There is an additional aspect to this. So this is very well expressed. That's exactly right. There's an additional aspect to this, which is, again, the nature of AI models, prompting and everything. It's highly composable. So when you start building these smaller workflows that you hand over and that people use and everything, and that's what happened recently with our team. When you introduce the idea of an agent, which is essentially some AI that you give instructions to, and that you explain how to use the different tools and how to chain them, you can create even more you can create more autonomy for these tools. So these workflows that were required to be triggered initially by human and everything, like slowly the agent itself can use them and chain them, and you can go a little bit further. It doesn't mean that everything is automated. It means that something that would be triggered by hand to trigger an actually like semi-automated workflow, now an agent can make that decision and can call a human. So for example, I don't know, generating some kind of, let's say for a second, we have something that is, it helps marketing with generating talking heads of one of our characters. They use that a lot in the marketing content. Usually it takes a lot of time for an artist to make these things. We built a workflow that works fairly well. It's composed in multiple pieces. One is you generate an image of the character. Another one is like you make the character move. You generate the voice. You combine the voice with the, and usually you would have by hand to go and put together these different parts of the workflow, move the files and everything. Right now we have an agent that does that automatically, but in between each one of the steps, it will ping the marketer who made the request and say, are you happy with this image? Yes, no, maybe, change something, and it will come back and then, finalize the workflow. The other option is to just say like, go on with whatever you're producing. Don't ask me. That's a possibility as well. But that's what the agentic system introduced. And so that's why I was saying like the composability of the AI flows is such an advantage these days. Like something we never really saw completely coming. We're like, oh, that's probably going to be useful that we have all these flows at some point, whatever. Well, the agent understands them, can chain them, and can come up with new flows. So that's even better. Again, not something that we completely saw coming, but now a marketer that wants a different character, or maybe just an animation of the character without a lip sync necessarily, whatever, they can just ask whatever they want from the agent, and you will be able to just be like, oh, okay, I can use that flow plus that flow for that flow. That should work. And most of the time it does. So there's still like some work to do on these things, but like it's all going in the same direction. And so this is very interesting. So now the artist is kind of building these blocks. We call them like foundational blocks of how to edit an image, how to make lip sync, how to do this, how to connect a voice to a video, extra. And they introduce the rules to make sure that everything is on model, on brand, and everything, and others can use them. So it's just like it keeps compounding. And I think it's just the nature of this tech. I can't really explain it. It's pretty flexible. Natural language excuses a lot of things as long as the reasoning is kind of there and the query is kind of clear. Like even if there's like grammar errors or whatever, it still understands what you want. If it doesn't, it will ask for, clarifications to have better context around the query, and it will just go on. And I think this works better for me than all the usual AI tools, which are, hard-coded, kind of like node-based, flows, or maybe those things that look a little bit like Photoshop, but more like AI-powered. That's great, right? No problem with this, but this is probably not as impactful.
Interesting.
Agentic is very, very impactful because of the fact that you can pour in your best practices, you can explain it how you would do things, you can check the results and fine tune that until you get something that works well, and then hand it over to someone who's not necessarily a specialist or an artist or whatever it is that. It's
so for you, like, and I'm going to try to reflect this, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
To date, most of the things I've heard from the art space is, there's some like, hey, I can give it a rough 2D image and it can sort of up-res it, and I can give it feedback and it'll work on it a little bit, and then I'll go in and I'll polish it up, like I'll paint over it and whatever, and eventually I sort of refine it in, and because I did enough touching of it, we own it as an IP. You're going like, yeah, that's fine, like that's fine, that might help you go faster. The actual win is when marketing comes to the artist and says, hey, I need an asset, which happens all the time in game development for marketing. And the artist goes, oh, here's the tool you use. Let me know if you have any questions or anything. It doesn't do anything you need. And the marketer just goes, oh, great. And then they just go start natural language talking to this thing, and they get what they want out of it. And because, again, having worked on teams that had to think about marketing the assets that we were creating in the context of actually League of Legends at the time, there's all the work you're doing to try to get the character over. And then there's also this like additional work you end up doing to try to support the marketing effort behind the character. And it is, it can be disruptive. And it's not, and I don't want to blame like the marketing publishing folks. They were very nice folks. But it was just always this thing of like, right, we got to, make sure we have time.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
And you see this all the time, actually. And like, we got a trade show or we got a thing. Can someone get me an asset or an image? And suddenly it's like, okay, I got to take a line artist off of development of core so that they can go do this thing.
That's exactly right.
And it's like, it's frustrating. We accept it. Like I said, it's not marketing's fault. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But it can be a pain in the butt. And you're just saying like, no. The helpful thing about what I just described is now marketing doesn't need to take that person offline for nearly as long, if at all.
That's exactly right.
They can more just do this. And so again, that lens of like, it's not about any individual tool. It's about tools that create tool chains.
Yes.
Or tools that create tools and tool chains. And then over time, the complexity of that goes up. And so you end up doing, like you said, this, okay. Thank you for explaining that and going into detail around it. So that's where you're seeing the biggest bang for buck across actual like core development is when these things start coming together.
Yes, exactly. And usually you'll have the same kind of pain points coming up with if you have a small team and you have to do both core development and live ops content. It's a little similar. I mean, as I said, talking to those like creative agencies as well, I see the same kind of pain points with, and I was talking to a senior creative director for, brands like L'Oreal or this kind of stuff. And he was just telling me like, yeah, look, we do all the core development, like the visual assets, branding and everything, like the campaign, right? Like we do all that stuff. But when it comes to all the collaterals and all this stuff, it sucks up so much over time to just like give the feedback, like, no, the color is not right. The product is not exactly like this, blah, 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 blah. And I showed them the product that we've been working on internally. And I was like, well, a lot of these things can be codified to an extent through an agent. And the output is essentially a very smart remix of all these things that compose the brand, but that you can control to an extent and say like, I want this with that, blah, blah, blah. So it's not designed to craft, right? It's not designed to make, let's say, completely controlled designs and everything. It's not for that. It's for pure production purpose. Like I have my brand set. I have all my art Bible done, art style guides. Everything is set. I need to produce content that will, follow that one-to-one. And so that's pretty exciting. So this is something, as I said, artists usually want to spend time on, core visual development, core assets and everything, not so much doing marketing content. And so, yeah, for that is very, very useful.
I think too, if I went to like Midjourney or ChatGPT's image generation and I was like, hey, I need an ad for something. I've actually attempted stuff like this around some of, my website and things like this. Can you give me something that blah, blah, blah. And it's not great. And, you can just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so again, what you're describing is you set up the context for it to be successful.
Yes.
And then once you're there, once you've gotten to the point where it can be successful, now I can give it some feedback. And the advantage of it over an actual artist is, I receive, when the artist is done with something, they send me the thing, and then I review it, and then I send them feedback. And then at some point in the future, they're going to continue working on it. Unless I'm sitting right next to them, which doesn't work at scale. They're not going to be able to just dive right into that. But because our artists have spent a lot of time developing the framework and creating the guardrails and the bounds, like the style guide and IP Bible, whatever, now I'm just having this ongoing tight feedback loop conversation with a series of tools that have been chained together to produce an output that is something I want. And if it ever doesn't work or doesn't get exactly what I want, I can always go talk to an artist and say,
oh yeah, for sure.
But now the interference level is much lower between the different work streams.
That's correct. Yeah.
Interesting.
And to an extent, I mean, the system that we've built in-house is so fine-tuned to what we do that the success rate is very high. So as a marketer, I can we use mentions, right? The character, like one of our characters called Amy, is add Amy, and he will load the context around the brand, around the IP, the character, the turnarounds, everything that is required to actually reproduce Amy in different situations and different scenarios. And they will usually get something that is usable pretty much like right off the bat, like just one prompt. Now, even if they don't get exactly what they want, they will get something that is quite close, and that's enough to send back to an artist and say, like, look, this is the kind of content I would need right now, because I'm going to have my graphics going here and there, and this is what I want to express. That's actually, anyways, this is going to speed up the process in any case. So, it's a very useful tool for that kind of works. I mean, that applies to even, design and product. I know some artists hate that. For us, it's like, yeah, well, it saves a lot of time. When a product person or PM or whatever sends us a mockup that they generated in Midjourney or anything, like actually helps us understanding what they have in mind rather than trying to guess or trying to have this back and forth and maybe we'll have an incomplete picture of what they want and then come back with something. It's like not exactly that. So it doesn't, I know that for some artists, it feels like, well, this is removing like my own agency, or it removes the conversation that, my ownership of what I'm doing. Like, I don't really feel like that's the case when, artists have the authority and the space that they should have to do their work, but it helps understanding. It really helps understanding what the other side have in mind, along with, a PRD or whatever design document. It's very useful.
Yeah. Okay.
Much faster to align.
Yeah. So you've worked in console PC. Right now you're in mobile. Now, there's someone out there and they're going like, yeah, cool, that's fine for your mobile stuff. It's like a little smaller scope. Like, yep, you got your marketing things and you're doing UA and whatever else. You got to keep your page fresh and whatnot. Like, but I work in, I'm building an open world RPG, or whatever it is, right? I'm building big games. Can you put yourself in the shoes to say, okay, yes, this is how I would, these things would still be useful. They would just take different shapes. Like, how would you encourage someone in that space to be thinking about this and how it's likely to shift workflows?
Yeah, this is a very good question. This is the main difference between smaller companies and larger. Let's take the example of the AAA studio where you have like hundreds of artists, and artists themselves are probably categorized in like, you have the character designer, and then you have like environment designers and lighter, and then, all that stuff. I do believe that's true right now. A lot of these tools are not really applicable to these kind of productions. I'm not going to suggest someone like, just go and use Midjourney and then integrate it in your work. No. And most of the time, these larger companies are asking for people to not use these tools, right? But my suggestion, given how things are moving, the fact that these models are getting better and better very quickly, the fact that, as an example, I think that was announced yesterday, EA and Stability just reached, a partnership agreement, and they're going to work together. Going to build models. They're going to integrate models into production. Tencent is obviously doing this for like 2 years now, at least. NCSoft they have their own internal models, and they have their own platform for internal content. So it's kind of, people are free to decide whatever they want to do, right? But it's kind of very clear where things are going. These tools are going to be used at some point. And the question is, if I was in their shoes and if I would believe that, yeah, this like AI is going to be there in production, I would start looking into those tools and looking into them. Like, I know they're flawed. I know they don't work exactly the way they should work. I know they're not exactly usable on the output. It's not usable for content creation right now for maybe a AAA game or whatever I'm doing that is maybe even more specific. Like, if I'm a lighter, AI is not usable at all. Like, it's not going to place lights for me right now in my scene. I understand that. But I would start looking into tools anyways, and I would revisit that from time to time just to understand the speed at which these tools are evolving and where do these things are converging, right? Like if we look at 3D, for example, it's a hard one. 2D has been easier, but 3D is difficult for AI. It takes more time and, but if we look at it like a year back where meshes looked like nothing, it was all mushy and, like very difficult to control and everything. Today, it's like a completely different thing. Models, they're still not super clean, but what comes out is like, if we're not looking at the mesh underneath and we're just looking at the looks of the object, some of them are very like, they look like a properly modeled and textured, piece of work. And so I think it's important. What I'm saying here is, in this case, although it's not applicable necessarily in our work, I would make sure that I look at it in an objective manner and just see what is it doing now? What was it doing yesterday? How do I feel about where this is going? Being informed rather than just ignoring it because, work doesn't allow me to use it. That would be my suggestion. Now, I'm sure there are opportunities, even as a writer, for example, I could use AI to do pre-visualization on my scene, for example. I could use that as, an additional content on top of concepts that could be shared with me. And I'm sure that, like, if we look for them, we will find the opportunities. Again, I appreciate that not all companies are open to using AI in production. So, let's deal with that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Now, talking about leaders across game development, what would you recommend for leaders in game development, being a leader in game development who's thought a lot about this in terms of how they approach the space of AI?
Very good question. Very good question. I guess that probably depends on the mandate that the companies have internally around AI, but let's assume for a second that there isn't an internal mandate.
Let's say there's not a ban.
So come again?
Let's say there's not a ban. There's not a ban on AI.
There is not a ban. Okay, so you're kind of suggested that we should be prepared for the future and we should probably, start looking into it. I would learn how to cut through the noise. And that's probably the hardest thing to do with AI right now and the communications around AI. I'll explain why, what I mean by that. There is an overflow of information around AI. AI can do everything and anything. AI can, you're going to walk on the moon tomorrow, like whatever, right? A lot of that stuff means nothing. Underneath that, there are few bits of information that are actually, because people sell the vision as well, there are actual practical pieces of information that we need to find. There are signals that we need to be able to extract from all that noise that is nonstop. And I think the best places to start for me, I would say probably Reddit and X, and without any judgment, just reading through these things and trying to define like who are the people who seem to be more balanced, more objective, even though, maybe they're like very vocal and very, kind of pro AI to an extent, but like identifying those people and cutting through. And it's like one of the things that I would suggest is go to Reddit, go into a particular forum, like maybe game dev or whatever, and look at what are people discussing, what are the different kind of like, conversations that are happening and converging and seeing like, okay, like it seems like 3D is getting more usable these days. I should look into this. I should look into models that they're discussing right now. And again, like going in with an open mind. And I think this is the hardest thing because AI so it suffers from two things, like all that noise and then also the negative kind of baggage that AI has as well. And you have to be able to pass through that. If as an individual, I'm not able to build some kind of faith in the fact that this technology can go somewhere and that it can be useful, I will never see it. Right? So it's like, I can't tell people to use AI if myself, I'm not kind of convinced that, yes, there is something that is doable with this. And I need to find it. And I need to be able to communicate that to my team as well. So that's one. Another one is obviously, as a leader, you have to have the hardest conversations with your team. You can't shy away from like what you just mentioned, like the legality, the morality of things. Like, how do we, if we're using AI, how would we use that, and hear what everyone has to say in the team about that. Avoid, like for me, that was the main goal, was avoiding toxicity as much as possible. I was ready to hear anything that anyone has to say about AI, even if it's like they feel like it's the most terrible thing in the world. But I needed people to be frank with me so we can at least have the conversation. So if I go back almost 3 years ago now, the first steps of the transition and the kind of like bringing, at least, the idea that we could maybe use AI was starting with just talking about it. So sharing the articles and talking about the articles and, how people felt on social media and how we felt as well. There is a big difference between the echo chamber in social media of like everyone outraged and everything is horrible and everything, and, the actual practical aspect of things. Like, how do we have a choice on how we could use that. Does it sit well with us and our principles and our values or not? And I'll be very frank, like with some people, it didn't. There are a few people on the team who didn't feel comfortable with using AI in general, and they left, or I asked them to leave. And that's okay. That's, that's part of the process. And there is no like I'm actually like very good relationship with them, which is understood that like what we're doing as a business right now is not something that they want to do as well. That's fine. And so there's, I would say like these hard conversations to have with the team and being as open as we can, cutting through the noise, being able to bring back those kind of bits of, as I said, like signal back to the team, and make sure that people can do their own work as well. So, because we're talking about leadership here, so leadership is not about us, right? It's about the team and about, particularly with AI, how we can affect this transition. For me, it's making sure that we have the right culture, the right space, and the right mindset when we approach the experiments and the research. I think that's the main thing. And then the last one is probably talking to peers, right? If there is anyone around us who uses AI, who has a good experience with it, like what are they doing with it? Because it's so fuzzy, right? Like, what can we do with it? I can use it to write. I can use it to just like summarize my mails. Like sometimes like you have like, a part of that actually is very important, which is for not just as a lead, but like for the individuals in the team. Every person, at least that's my experience. I don't know for others, but that was my experience with my team. Everyone on the team had a slightly different kind of point of entry with AI. I don't know if just a point of entry is the right term, but like a way to appreciate like, oh, okay, that can be useful for that. Like, and getting a little more warmed up to the idea of like, okay, maybe I can use AI. There was one artist in particular, like her thing was, it was funny, but she was like, I don't like to clean up my sketches so I can bring them to a stakeholder. I don't like to do that. And she discovered like there was a tool, like a Stable Diffusion workflow that was doing that. So it would take like a very rough sketch and make it like cleaner. And she could bring a bunch of sketches, like she could keep working very rough and bring that to the stakeholder for a review. And that was that was the first step for her, like into, oh, okay, AI can be useful for some of these things. So yeah, finding these little things, especially if we have a team that is a bit resistant to the idea of AI. That would be my recommendation, and to not kind of bend under the pressure, like the social pressure of sometimes like very strong voices outside are saying like it's completely evil. If you touch AI, you're morally bankrupt, and all these things. It really affects, particularly on the entertainment, in the creative industry, it really affects people. There is a group of people who really dislike AI. I mean, they have their reasons, and they exercise a lot of pressure on the rest of the industry, who sometimes don't even dare looking at it because they know that they're going to be categorized as horrible people if they do. And I think it was, for me at least, it was very important part of these conversations that I mentioned, that people felt comfortable with that they, we're using AI. You're going to be in a company that uses AI. People are going to hate that. You may have pressure from your peers, and you're going to have to be comfortable with that and comfortable with what you're doing. So in a way, I saw my job. Sorry, I'm kind of like
No, it's fine.
remembering
That's fine.
a
I
little
really
bit
appreciate this.
of what we went through, but I remember clearly at some point thinking like, I have to, when I have people on my team who are open to it and we're starting to get into the ideas like, yeah, that can be useful and it's not evil, can I provide them with ways to resist, that external pressure? I've had people in the hiring pipeline who just dropped off because they were okay with the idea of using AI, and they were very frank. It was like, look, I'm talking around with my friends, and like, I don't feel comfortable using AI anymore. I don't want to get into a company. And that was like 2 years ago. So yeah, I think this is at least for me as a lead, that's something that was very, very important for me to build that kind of environment.
I really appreciate your response here, because it wasn't, oh, buy these 3 tools for everybody on your team so they can start playing. You really actually focused heavily on the humans that are in the team. You focused heavily on, like, what does it mean for them to be heard, to feel heard, to be comfortable with the direction we're going, to address what could otherwise be the elephant in the room of, there are some people that are quite against these tools in any form. Some people don't mind them for code and they don't mind them for some text, but they don't like them for art. And like, everybody's got sort of their own, take on that. And to realize that to be somebody, and I think you've been that way throughout this entire call. You've been very just like, look, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. It's even coming back to the moral and legal conversation, it's a pragmatic frame on this. I'm taking a pragmatic frame. I don't think it's an unprincipled frame. You're not trying to be like, I just will do whatever tries to make money at all costs. But it's like within the context of where we are, within the context of the geopolitical reality and the macroeconomic situation, like, this is where this is going. And for the best outcomes for all of us, starting with our company, these seem like the right moves, even if they are unpopular right now.
Actually, that's a very good point. Yes, I forgot about that, but we started with the company, the kind of like the effect of not being open to a technological change on the company. What could happen to us if we don't look at it objectively? And we never, in the early stages, we never said like, you have to use AI, you have no choice. It was more like, you can criticize it and you can but please give it a fair chance. Like, look at the content, give it a try, see if there is something that you find interesting. Let's talk about it. And naturally, people kind of found like things that were useful to them, and that really helped. But it all started by, there is this change. We're a small company. We can't afford just not looking at it. We have to honestly look at it. It was the same for, we've done projects that have blockchain elements to it. It was like, there's this new tech. Is there something new that we can do with that? Is there something better that we can do with that? And there was the same conversations. And also some people were not comfortable with blockchain. And that's fine. Like, no problem with that. But I think it's part of just the DNA and the culture of the company. Like, we can't afford at our size to just ignore it. We have to look at it. And that's fine if we refuse to use it. That's fine. But we should be informed. That's it. Just make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And that was the same approach with AI.
And that sounds like is that where you started in the context of Mighty Bear and Goat Games? It was just like, hey, there's this tool. It's a new tool. Our
100%.
company culture is one like, well, we're going to lean in. We're going to take a look at it. And when you looked into it, you kind of said, okay, this is helpful. We should figure out how to do more with this.
Absolutely. We had, now we can look back and say, like, have things really panned out exactly that way? No, not exactly. But the way we approached blockchain, we're like, well, maybe we're idealistic, right? But we're like, well, this is great. There is another way to facilitate, trading, to facilitate payments. There is another way to provide clarity over, for example, like company finances. It's all on chain. We take the, payments are on chain. People can look at the blockchain. They can see exactly, how much we're making out of these things. They can see how healthy or not the project is. They can, and there's like some crypto ethos that sound ridiculous sometimes, but some people really believe in that. I'm part of that. I'm like, I believe that it's good when transactions are on chain and they're traceable and people can look at them. I believe that, and again, players don't really care about ownership or anything, but I think it can be good that you can look at your asset and be like, oh, that's on my wallet, that's on mine. I can see where it came from. Like, fine. Even from an infrastructure point of view, for us, blockchain was very useful. It's like, well, we don't need to build all these payment systems and everything. We can use, smart contracts, and everything that we do is perfectly legal. Like, we're audited. We're like everything is, clean. And for us, it made sense, especially there was a point where, the IDFA was removed, so it was very hard. So on mobile, the IDFA allowed us to target users and do self-publishing, and that was super important for us as a self-published, developer, and that was removed. And without this, we're like, we can't. We have no way to do user acquisition on mobile. So what can we do? And there were a few different places. There was Apple Arcade. There was blockchain. That was also an option as well, because blockchain has its own environment, and games in this environment, you can be discovered, you can find your audience, and all of that. And we did both. So we worked with Apple Arcade, and then after Apple Arcade, we did a project that was more blockchain focused. And nowadays, we don't necessarily have like this grand vision of like, how to say that, like,
the metaverse.
The metaverse, for example. We never really thought about like the metaverse, but we're thinking, again, we're very pragmatic. We're thinking like, this is a good, from an infrastructure perspective, payment management. And I know it's used for very shady stuff, but at the same time, you can use it. You can use it to provide, clarity and transparency over how the project is run. And that's the way we wanted to do that. But in the end, it's more like, okay, it's more like a facilitation for payment. I mean, people can check on, but no one really cares at the end. Like, people just want to have a good experience, and it's not a good experience. Blockchain is still like there's a lot of friction. But yeah, again, the way we went into this was based on us as a company, where we were standing, the size of our company, what were the opportunities, and also does that match our values, our principles, and how we think of ourselves. Like, I believe I'm a fairly professional person. I've worked with very large IPs, very large companies, very small ones. There's like, I have ethics. Like, I don't have any problem working in blockchain because I know what I'm doing with this. I know I'm not scaring people. I know, I don't have any problem using AI because I know what I'm doing with it as well. And I know that it fits my principles. And generally that's been the approach. Yeah. New platforms as well. I mean, we're
dive in, experiment, try it out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But it's true that as a company, we do a lot of things that are often not very, I would say, not appreciated much. Like, when you say we're doing we have a blockchain experience here, and then we use a lot of AI and all that stuff. Like, people have often, concerns around that. Of course, like when, we present what we're doing and we go a little bit more in depth, fine. But I understand where this is coming from.
Yeah. Cutting edge. All right. I think we're well over time, but thank you for giving me the extra time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
This has been a really cool conversation. Any last things you want to send people to? Any last places you want to send people to check out?
Yeah, actually, we shall have an updated landing page soon, but mightybeargames.com, which is our current company page. There's just a little summary of the project that we're working on. There is a bit on the company. There's a bit on the what I mentioned, like our values in general and how we view technology and why we're kind of going into these new platforms, or we're experimenting with these new technologies, and generally how we approach these sometimes divisive, kind of pieces of tech. And then, you'll see the projects that we're working on right now. I hope that we're going to have a lot more to say about that internal Agentic tool that we developed that is working very well for us, and I would hope that we can make it work for other companies as well. So anyone interested in this, we share a lot of behind the scenes and kind of like dev diaries as well. So can get a sneak peek of what we're doing there.
Perfect. Ben, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, pleasure, Ben. Thank you for having me. It was a really nice discussion.
Great. All right. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Okay. Key points I'm pulling away from this one. There's a lot of them. Number one, the ethical problems with AI look different than what we've seen before. The space is complicated by whether you see it as moral or not, whether it's necessary to stay competitive or not, and whether it's just a morally neutral tool that we can use for good or evil. Also, matters where you expect it to go. But right now, questions in this broad space seem more common than answers. 2. AI via LLMs are the genie out of the bottle. Now, is it our job to regulate what people do with it, or are we going to try to get it back into that bottle and regulate what goes into it? 3. Using AI can be viewed as hostile to employees, but in Ben's case, it is something being used to keep people employed and more productive. As I look out at companies performing layoffs, I wonder if Ben's approach would not have served them even better than trying to reduce headcount with AI as an excuse. 4. To date, people haven't been able to get their content legally pulled out of LLMs despite efforts. Nor have people been able to copyright things made with LLMs. For me, this looks like the government's stance is one of taking hands off and letting it go, while avoiding people copyrighting things produced by a model fed by content they don't own. It also means companies will need to keep an eye on the legal realm around LLMs to make sure a change doesn't take them out. 5. There's almost a hierarchy of ethics being discussed here, where at the governmental level, guidance and direction, or lack thereof, is cascading down to companies and from there to their leaders and to employees, and eventually probably even to consumers. I don't know if I love that, but it is what it is, and personally, I'm torn on whether AI is good, bad, or otherwise in terms of the future. I see a lot of potential issues with it, but to Ben's point, it's also been very helpful in doing some things that we otherwise would be unable to do, or at least unable to do as quickly. 6. Large companies take more risks engaging with AI than smaller ones, and that might be a competitive advantage for smaller studios. 7. If your culture was already terrible, AI can make it even worse for everyone. If it was good, AI might be able to improve on that or accelerate it. And there are some clear use cases where it does seem to help out in development. 8. Players want to play good games. It may not matter in the long run whether those games are made with AI or not. Mobile may just be further along in that curve than PC console are right now. 9. AI can increase prototyping speed, which can help you invest resources in better bets sooner. It's worth thinking about, even if you use none of that stuff when you're doing final development. 10. One of the most interesting points of this conversation, for me at least, was the idea that AI via LLMs is a tool to let people build tools and tool chains that can reduce dependencies or take uninteresting work off of their hands. It's not what AI does directly in workflow, it's what AI can be turned into that makes it replace workflows almost entirely. 11. There's a human-centric approach to using LLMs, or at least Ben thinks there is. The layoffs covered in the news that are blamed on AI are actually decisions made by people, by leaders, by companies doing the things that they've always done. That's a choice, but it isn't the only available choice, and often it seems to be scapegoating prior bad management decisions. 12. If you're a leader in game dev, you should be looking at how your people might benefit from AI in some of its forms. We've used AI a long time in game dev for a lot of different things. Creating literal AI for NPCs, machine learning, procedurally generated maps, etc., etc. If you're going to LLMs and you're going to look into that and see how it can be helpful, it doesn't mean you have to force everyone to use it. You should probably be open to hear people in your team talk about it, negatively and positively, and to be looking to see if it can help out. It does continue to improve, but it still isn't replacing the need for human expertise, at least in my opinion. All right, hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks.